I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers.
The whole fleet of them, what's on the ASA? My God.
Unidentified.
The acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
Anomalous.
We have spacecraft from another species.
We do, yeah.
How many?
Quite a number.
Since 1947, we have received and analyzed between 1 and 2,000 reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things.
Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Unidentified Anomalous Podcast. I'm Digby Thurno, and joining me, as always, is my good friend, Tom Thompson. How are you doing, Tom?
Digby, I'm doing great. It's been a long week of work, but we're here. It's Sunday. It's the best time of the week. I'm happy to be here with you, my friend. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I love Sundays. I love Sundays even more when my internet's working well enough to give me video. So you're just going to have to perpetually see that image of me looking absolutely beautiful for the next 2 hours. Although if my internet improves, I will turn my video on. We have a guest coming on to join us today. She's going to be with us in a minute. I think she's just having some computer issues. And here she is. Here she is.
One of our favorite people.
I'm out of breath. I just ran up the stairs trying to get here in time, so I apologize.
No, you're good. You're totally good. Hello again, Paige. Obviously, we were on a call with you earlier. It feels like I just saw you.
Yes. Well, you did. Yes.
That's exactly right. So also, before we begin, because it will inevitably come up in conversation, I have two main reasons why I am wearing this shirt that says "Let's start a cult." A, it shows off my impeccable physique, and two, I want some crazy conspiratorial YouTuber to find this podcast and then make like an entire series about how they think I'm a Satanist. Like once that happens, I know I've truly made it.
Then you have made it, my friend.
I'm not a Satanist, but that was funny. I like the shirt.
He is not.
Anyway, let's move on from for God's sake.
It's been a hell of a week.
It is. Yeah, wow. That's kind of an understatement, Digby. I would say, at least behind the scenes for us, it has quite spectacular. And there's going to be some things that we're going to talk about today that initially have been private, and that's why today's kind of an explosive episode for us. Paige is very much privy to what I am talking about right now. We're going to be very careful in trying to navigate those waters as respectfully as we can. But yeah, we have a lot to talk about today. There's no question about it. And all jokes aside, we are going to get very serious. I know we inject humor into our show often, like I just did about my shirt. But the conversation that we're going to inevitably have on today's episode is of the utmost seriousness, in my opinion.
People's lives and their
absolutely
safety. And
that's true.
Indeed.
Their ability to live.
Indeed. Let's kick this off. Let's kick this off with what took us down this path on this week. I mean, Paige, you and I and Tom have been talking for a number of weeks now, but the path that we're going to go down today was certainly speared on by Lou's statement on the Good Trouble show. It brought it to the attention of an awful lot of people in the community around the world with what's going on with whistleblowers and the and what they're facing. So, Tom, I believe you've got Lou's statement ready.
Let me just get it pulled up.
Yeah, 2 seconds. So we'll just start off by going through that.
He was in the Good Trouble show, and
go through it.
He didn't make a physical appearance on the show. Just to be clear, it was a statement that I believe was submitted directly to Matt Ford, if I'm not mistaken, our friend Matt Ford. And
Correct.
I'm just bringing it up now. I wish there was a faster way to do this. I really do. But I'm getting better at it. All right. So there's a couple slides here. I'll read it for everybody there that may not be watching and are doing audio only. This statement comes directly from Lou Elizondo via Matt Ford on the Good Trouble Show. Lou said, "When people first inquired about my story, Pentagon initially confirmed my role in ATIP and the focus of its efforts. Shortly after Secretary Mattis left the department, the Pentagon changed its tune by saying all my emails had been deleted, the same emails that would substantiate not only my claims, but many of those who were part of the ATIP effort, including one of its sponsors, the late Senator Harry Reid." Later, when confronted with a FOIA request, the Pentagon denied again the existence of any email or correspondence between me and other seniors within the department whom I was regularly engaged with until the day I left the Pentagon in 2017. Recently, one of my emails was leaked by an unknown person on Reddit. This time, when the Pentagon was challenged with the existence of the email, in this case, one that described the authorized transfer of ATIP leadership responsibilities to another senior member of the department and endorsed by the Secretary of Defense front office, they were forced to admit this email existed and was not deleted as they previously claimed. Begrudgingly, when the Pentagon finally did release the email, proving my role and participation in ATIP, the Pentagon decided to redact the mention of ATIP, citing FOIA exemptions. By this logic, they would also have to redact the name Arrow and any other office at the Pentagon. It should also be noted that the Pentagon's mouthpiece for this is one individual within the Public Affairs Office who has been given sole authority to handle all FOIA requests involving UAPs, Arrow, ATIP, and specifically me. All this information is in the public sphere and can be easily verified thanks to the works of certain private citizens fighting for increased government transparency through the FOIA process. Simply put, you and Congress continued to be lied to by a few at the Pentagon who prefer to view you and the American people as sheeple. Make no mistake, the Pentagon Public Affairs Office has a long history of feeding misinformation to certain questionable journalists to mislead the American public, and that relationship is alive and well today and is in fact now legal through a new and disturbing policy of perception management. To add insult to injury, I was notified yesterday that there may be a personal threat against myself and several other whistleblowers formerly associated with the UAP effort for the U.S. government. As such, I would like to make this perfectly clear to the American people. I am not prone to accidents. I am not suicidal. I am not abusing drugs. I am not engaged in any illicit activities. If something happens to me or my family members in the future, you will know what happened, and that is directly from the former director of Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, Luis Elizondo. Jeez.
Yeah. So a lot of you have probably seen the article that I released on X through our New Paradigm Media Group website pertaining to some information that I had been provided by a source. About the fact that that's not actually where the story ends. The story actually ends somewhere a lot more tragic in the fact that a whistleblower has unfortunately, it would appear, lost their life trying to come forward to the American public, to the people of the world, about the information that they have. It's my belief, and it's only my belief, this is not based on fact, that this was probably a move to send a very clear message to those that plan on coming forwards that maybe they should think twice about doing so. And you know, this information was corroborated by a couple of sources that I have, well, three actually. One main one to begin with, and then was backed up consequently by a few other people afterwards. So this information can be taken seriously. I know there's a lot of people that have commented on the post going, they wanted the names of the people I spoke to and the names of the person who met an unfortunate end. I don't know the name of the person who met the unfortunate end. I'm sure they want to keep that private for fear of any further reprisals against themselves or their family, or well, not against themselves, obviously, but certainly their family. You know, these things aren't funny, and it goes to highlight how serious this subject is. And there are a lot of us, me as well, in the past, who have had a lot of interest in this subject, and it's exciting, and we want to find out more. We want to get to the truth. We want to understand what UAP are, what NHI are. But we also have to remember that for the people actually involved in the phenomena, the ones trying to get us the truth, seemingly only for some people's entertainment, there is a very, very serious side to this, and people out there are paying the ultimate price for us to get to the truth. And I think that we all need to take a moment and really appreciate that and realize it, because this isn't a game, and there are people out there that see it that way, but they only see the entertainment purposes or side of it. And I think we all need to take a moment and realize exactly how serious this is. Moreover, Tom and I have always said to you guys that, this isn't just a podcast for us. We have spent the last year trying to embed ourselves in, the deeper side of the UAP phenomenon and make connections, which we are very fortunate enough to have made. We don't take the responsibility of that lightly, nor do we see this as a game. We want to make sure that all of you know that and appreciate that, but we also want to make sure that we can do something to give back to the people out there that are behind the scenes doing all this work, and we also want to make a difference. To that end, I know Paige has already posted about this on her X. I was lucky enough to make connection with Jason Sands shortly after he came out in his Twitter space. And I've been in conversation with Jason for, I don't know, just over a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks. I reached out to him initially and then introduced him to Tom, as any good co-host would.
Even though we had already met, technically.
I introduced him. Yeah. Well, yes, quite.
Through that space, but I mean, he talked to so many people.
Consequently, through that, we then introduced him to Paige because we thought it was going to be good for him to have somebody on his side with much more of a legal mind than myself and Tom can provide, which is why Paige is here with us today to shed some light on that. But today's episode is pretty much going to primarily revolve around whistleblowers, the hardships that they face, and what we can do to protect them. I'm pretty sure that Jason is probably watching this episode. So, Jay, if you are there, welcome, and thank you for everything that you've done for me and Tom and Paige thus far. So, yes. Over to you guys.
Sincerely, I have a lot of very strong feelings about what's going on right now, especially with Jason's situation and just the world of the whistleblowers at large. Obviously, I wrote up a follow-up article to yours, Digby, that highlighted some of my feelings and concerns because I think a lot of people don't take into deep consideration what someone in that position will face. And as I scroll through X and other social media platforms, there's a variance of opinions, and rightfully so, to be fair. None of us can sit here and say that we 100% know for sure that the individuals that have come out with these accounts are telling the truth. We that's not something that we could do. It's impossible. However, when they have verified all of their work history, their background, what they're doing now, etc., then it ultimately comes down to their story. And because I am an experiencer, because there's a lot of other people on this planet that are experiencers, and not only that, but people that I have spoken to personally that I trust, that I absolutely emotionally resonate with after learning of what they've gone through, that they shared with me personally. Until I am given something exceptional as a red flag, I am going to stand with Jason and anybody else that is deemed a credible whistleblower at this time. I understand that might not be a popular stance in the eyes of certain people. There are some that think, to be quite frank and blunt, that Jason's full of shit and think that Grush is full of shit. They think everybody's full of shit. Elizondo, they think this is all some sort of psyop or what have you. But I ask a very simple question at the end of my article. It's the last sentence. What if they're telling the truth? We would be making such a massive mistake in not supporting these individuals. And when I say that, you know, you can do that carefully. You can still exercise caution. You could be like, well, you know, I'm not so sure about their story. However, because I'm on the fence, I'm going to, in the least, be respectful of them and show support for them simply for the fact that if they are telling the truth, that's exactly what they need from the public at large at this time. You know, and to be even more blunt, I think one would be doing themselves a disservice by drawing immediate conclusions based off of a Twitter space. That's not enough. You know, I have, just like you, Digby, spoken with Mr. Sands quite regularly recently to a high degree on a variety of topics, even outside of the phenomenon. So I've gotten to really feel him out, and I was able to directly ask him about my own concerns with the red flags that were popping up in the community. I was like, okay, well, this person said this comment bothered them because whatever. And then I said, Jason, you know, can you clarify what you meant by that? Because, you know, he was in the moment. He was in that Twitter space for 7 hours, I believe. And there were some things that were misconstrued and a lot of pressure was on him at that time. And I am going to be extremely honest. I am satisfied with the clarification that Jason Sands has provided me personally. And based on that, I am choosing to support him. And I understand, again, some people aren't going to like that because they disagree with that stance. However, at the end of the day, regardless of the whistleblowers, regardless of all of that, all of us want the same thing if we're in this community. We just want to know the truth. We want to know what the government and the military knows. We want to know what they have, and where this is all going. The true nature of reality at large, essentially, our place in the universe. So we can agree to disagree, but like, there's no reason to get vicious or deeply disrespectful just because somebody is supporting another person that you personally don't. There's ways that we can build bridges with one another and find compromises and stand on common ground, whether you support Jason or not. And ultimately, that's what I want people to take away from what I'm saying, is that regardless of your opinion of any whistleblower, there's still something going on out here that we need to get to the bottom of, and we can still do that together despite our differences at this time.
And we're all human. I mean, I can't like stress that enough, that I don't, you know, these people, whether or not you believe every aspect of every story that they've told, one, we're all human. People make mistakes. There are going to be things that may not be in line with your reasoning or your understanding of this topic in general, but it doesn't change the fact that these people are human. They are another human. Like, you can show your disagreement respectfully, like you were saying, rather than totally trashing them on a personal level or trashing them as, you know, their intelligence or their family, like just all of these little things. You know, it seems so unnecessary and divisive. Like, why draw these lines between different individuals and look for reasons not to believe them when you can just look at them at the fact that they're just a human, and imagine what they are going through from an aspect of whether or not you're getting to talk to them first, or they did it a certain way or a different way than other, somebody else would have done it. Like, it doesn't make them any less of a human or less of a whistleblower. And the shit that all of these people are going through is rough. And it's just like beyond what a lot of us can even comprehend they're having to deal with, because not only are they dealing with the shit that people are talking on Twitter and everything else, they still have their lives. They still have to go through this process with Congress, and they still have to deal with other whistleblowers and their day jobs and everything else. Like, they are human beings who have lives, and to just publicly trash them when in reality they're heroes. Whether or not you 100% agree with these people, they're heroes and they're doing the right thing, and disrespecting them does not help anybody's cause. And in fact, if anything, it just really pulls into question what their goal is. Like, why do you feel the need to trash a certain individual when, like, what's your goal here? Because it's clearly not to help humankind as a whole, if that's what you're looking at. So
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
Paige.
no,
And
you're absolutely
just ask
right.
questions, ultimately. I'm sorry, Digby. I think there's a little tiny bit of a delay.
Yeah, there is a little lag. I can confidently say, after my lengthy discussions with Jason through messaging, many phone calls, etc., I personally will say that I'm completely confident in what Jason is saying to us, and I thank him for his service, and I thank him for what he's doing now. The idea that what we want to put forward at the moment is very much in its infancy, but we are looking into ways to draw the community together and to show solidarity with whistleblowers. I think the problem at the moment, and the reason why we have this issue where unfortunately some poor soul has lost their life, is while whistleblowers are waiting in the wings on their own, it's easy to, forgive me, pick them off one by one. We need solidarity behind these whistleblowers. We need to give them the confidence that they need and the support that they need to come forward. Because as the old saying goes, it's safety in numbers. It's easy to pick people off when we don't know who they are, but if they're forward facing, front facing, in front of a camera, everybody knows who they are. People can't get away with pulling these moves anymore. And us as a podcast and us as people want to stand behind and with these whistleblowers to show them that our community is a safe community to come out into, and that we will be showing them support, and we will do everything in our power to make them realize that.
Also,
it's one of the reasons why we brought Paige along with us on this journey, and indeed on the show today, is the legal aspect of it. Sorry, Tom.
No, that's okay. I know we're going to do our best to deal with the wonky little lag there, but I also want to throw this point in too, that I wrote in my article. I'll say it verbatim. Should any of these individuals be identified as disseminators of disinformation at any future point, we, meaning myself, Digby, Paige, and any of the people that are closely associated with us, will promptly acknowledge this revelation and unequivocally condemn such behavior, because we want truth and we want to defend the people that are fighting for that. But at the same time, if it is revealed that any of these individuals are essentially pulling our legs, I mean, we're going to condemn that. Full stop, because that's a disgrace, in my opinion. It's a shameful act. But after having conversations with certain individuals deep down in me, in my gut, and being able to look some of these people in the eye, I believe them. I do. I believe Jason. I'm just going to say it. I do. I believe that's where I sit right now. I believe him. I do.
Absolutely. I mean, why lie? There's this narrative that so many people have that, like, they're trying to get famous and they're trying to make money and stuff. Like, has anyone paid attention to how these people are treated in the public? I mean, supposedly, like, Lou Elizondo is, the star of it, but all I see people ever doing is trashing him online. And all that does is discredit a story that, once again, we all have our own individual pieces to this puzzle. So the more that we are separated by these unnecessary arguments and unnecessary, like, tiffs between the community, the more that we're never going to get anything out. And we're all on the same team. Like,
yes,
we are all on the same team here. And so, yeah, it's just, it seems silly to me, especially as somebody like, in the UFO world where all the skeptics are like, but show me the evidence. Well, like, okay, show me the evidence of this person being not who they say they're being. Show me the evidence that these whistleblowers coming forward are not who they claiming and are not doing, like, they can't do that.
That's a
They're
good point.
Literally there to throw shit in the mix and confuse everybody and get people all worked up and not be paying attention to what matters.
It's also terribly unfair to put whistleblowers or any of these witnesses into a position of expectancy for providing the type of proof that would satisfy what they're looking for. As Jay humorously put it, there's no fucking way he is going to be able to strap a UFO to his back. Like, this is so complicated. It's a complex situation. Like, you can't expect that. Like, scientifically speaking, that's not his job, essentially. I mean, he's reporting things that have happened, that he's seen, and the next best step is to have individuals who could potentially corroborate one another, right? Like, that's a big deal to have that, especially because, it's power in numbers. But you can't ask Grush or Elizondo or Sands or anybody like that to pull a flying saucer out of their garage. This is one facet of the situation that we're dealing with. Like, if they're able to corroborate each other in some way, right, that could at least alert some officials in Congress or someone in the government, for God's sake, to make some sort of move, to take it seriously, to start looking into it, and then that's how we can start pushing things aside and potentially getting ourselves as close as possible to materials and biologics, etc. But you can't ask that of a single individual. That's an impossibility. It's not realistic at all.
No, especially when you've got, there's other whistleblowers who will show their stories show that this shit can just disappear like that. So, if you're, what are you going to do? Bring them to some black site to try to show them the UFO that you had seen previously that can disappear in a matter of seconds?
Yeah, right.
Whistleblower testimony out there about that too. So it's an impossible task, but I think that's intentional. Kind of like, the fact that Congress is saying, yeah, we'll help you do this and this and this, but also whistleblowers, we're not going to pay for your airfare. We're not going to pay to protect you in any sort of capacity. And, oh yeah, we can't protect your job, but yeah, I dare you, come forward. Let me know how it works out.
Yeah. And then the public expects them to jump through flaming hoops. It's like, what if we got to put ourselves in their shoes, right? Like, that's something I kind of threw into my article as well. Like, I thought of an extensive list of potential obstacles and repercussions that a true whistleblower could potentially face. And it's long, right? It's not just about public scrutiny and, people are going to talk smack about you on social media. Like, it's legal fees, loss of employment, other financial burdens, and again, in extreme cases, threats to their personal safety or that of their families. Most people, I would say 99 out of 100 people, if you ask them what they would do in a situation like this, and knowing that it would put their family members at risk, especially if they have young children, I think a lot of people are going to be like, you know what, I'm just going to back off and let somebody else do that.
Yeah, and a lot of them do.
And I get that, right? And I get that though, right? Like, family comes first always. I'm a big family person myself, and it's like, what would I do in that situation? I'd probably protect my family, right? Yeah. So I get that, but then some people take that the wrong way, and they're like, but humanity and disclosure, yes, those things are giant, massive, important, and such. But everyone, please, I urge you to take a moment and really think about what it would be like from a first-person perspective. Like, sit down and meditate on this if you have to. Think about what it would really be like if you were in the military and you witnessed something extraordinary, and what that would actually be like. And it is not a position. I don't think anybody would even want to be in this position. Actually, it's not fun. This isn't fun. Some people can go up on Reddit and type up a story about how they worked for this secret organization or this branch of the military, and then they saw something and then they just disappear because it was fun for them to type up a fucking story, right? But when it's real life, there's nothing fun about this at all. It's quite emotional. If it could cause anxiety, mental health issues, I mean, the list goes on as far as the negative side of this. It is a giant laundry list of things that people typically don't want to deal with.
Right. Which is, in turn, I mean, like,
yeah, absolutely.
That's why we have to be here to support each other, to support everybody who comes forward, and at a minimum, show respect for these people who are literally risking their lives, and from like, I always harp on this from the American perspective, this country particularly is so damn big on patriotism and showing respect for this country and blah, blah, blah. Yet it's the same country who consistently shits on our veterans and consistently is shitting on whistleblowers who are coming forward to do these things, who, I mean, putting their lives out on the line to protect our country in numerous ways. And it's the same country harping on patriotism that is the same country who will pick them off right and left or leave them on the street for dead because it's not convenient for that certain government or that specific company. And it's like, so how do we address that unless we can all be on the same team and all support each other with the understanding that you don't have to be like-minded on every single aspect of this to just be a respectful, good human that can see from another human's perspective. I love that. It should
Agreed.
be easy for us to be able to just talk, but things are so politicized. Things are so, I don't know, like messy in so many
Toxic.
different aspects of it. It just makes it so hard to do that. So, yeah.
I think the problem that we've faced, and I've spoken about this at length on the show, I know that, but we have a community, especially on Twitter, that is very divided, that is being pulled apart by certain key players that want us, seemingly want us to be fighting at each other. And we need to get back to the basics here of why we're all here. We're here because we want to find the answers we've been searching for our whole lives. We want disclosure. But I think at the moment, the problem is that we haven't got anywhere, excuse me, to direct our energy. Therefore, everybody is infighting and bickering, and this is not going to achieve anything. And if we are going to just sit back and wait for people like Lou Elizondo, David Grush, Jason Sands to come forwards and give us disclosure, it's not going to happen like that. We need to be involved. We need to be asking questions of our representatives. We need to stand by these whistleblowers. We need to show them and give them the confidence they need to step up and go the next step. And we're not doing that while we're arguing or taking sides with the next UFO Twitter semi-celebrity. This is what we want to do. We want to create a movement or an idea and give people a direction, give people something to work towards, give everybody online, on Twitter, on whatever platform you're on, something to do with their time. And it is time for us to come together because, shit just got really real. This isn't a game anymore. What's happened and what's come to light this week really shows us the severity of the situation. And, I'm pissed. I'm really pissed. I know Tom's really pissed. I'm sure Paige is really pissed too. And, we need to take that. We need to take that energy and we need to funnel it into something that's productive. So that's what we intend to do.
Strongly agree with that sentiment. Yeah, we are angry. And just for clarification, because I've gotten a lot of questions in my DMs today, the information that we've shared about this individual that may have lost their life, everything that you guys have seen publicly coming from Digby's article, my article, and anything that we've said, that's all we know. We don't know their name. We don't know where it happened. We don't know anything like that. We're not hiding anything. We're not gatekeeping any information. That it's just that came across our desk, so to speak. And we were startled by it. It's not something that we are happy to be reporting about. It's not something we want to happen. Because I guess some people out there thought this was like a trust me bro clout move, and it's like, look, go to hell. I'm just gonna be really honest and really blunt. Go fuck yourself, honestly. That's not a joke to me. I understand in the world of podcasting and talking about quote unquote fringe topics that there's people out here that really don't take anything seriously, and will absolutely go on and tell stories, even stories like this, of a serious nature, just for attention. We're just not in the business of doing that. It's not the direction that my moral compass points, and I can speak for Digby and Paige in saying that the things that we talk about behind the scenes and the things that we do, that we're trying to brainstorm and such, are always in the best interest of the truth, for disclosure for ourselves, while still maintaining any semblance of safety for whistleblowers and witnesses alike. We want as positive an outcome as possible for this. This is not like a fucking role-playing game. We're not LARPing. We're not out here playing Dungeons and Dragons UFO edition. Like, this is real. This is something that we're really involved with. And when we share information publicly, there's a reason for that if we've been told something. And journalistically speaking, yes, there are advantages. I said it in my article. Sometimes we hear about things early, maybe a week or two, maybe the day before. That happens. That's normal. Welcome to the world of journalism, ladies and gentlemen. That's what goes on when you're connected with people and you talk to people about these things on a daily basis. And those people are also connected. They have positions of trust that they've been put in, along with ourselves. This is something that we all need to join hands on and come together, and we can make something happen. I mean, my God, look at 2017 up to this point. So much progress has actually been made. And yes, I understand it's frustrating when people just want the golden ticket. I get that. There is a level of frustration even for myself, where it's just like, all right, come on, like, let's just make this happen. So let's just make this happen then. Like, it's a grassroots effort. Like, we're all in this. We're the ones that are at the end of the day at the foundation. We're the ones that are causing change. We're the ones that are reaching out to whistleblowers and speaking to them. I mean, I would dare say that Digby and myself, Paige, Astral, and a lot, all of our close friends in the community, Paul, on a weekly basis, are probably doing more than even the Congress representatives are, or other representatives in government. And that's not to pat ourselves on the back. That's to light a fire under their asses and say, look, we're regular citizens doing this. And if we can do it, you can do it. And if we're all doing it together, then we're going to make something happen. But until you do, we're going to take the ball and we're going to run down the field and score that touchdown. That's us. We're going to do it if we have to.
Yeah.
I agree.
I mean, to give an example, it's not every single week that you get to speak to a first-hand whistleblower like Jason Sands and Dr. Stephen Greer in the same week. So we are taking this seriously. We are doing what we can, and we will speak to people that are involved. And some people we will agree with, some people we won't agree with. That's fine. You don't need to agree with everybody to be able to deliver on this. Right? You don't need to bring somebody else's perspective and personality into question. You just need to have the same motivation and the same motive and the same goal to achieve. And some people, some people you will agree with, and some people you won't agree with. But we don't need that. Somebody's just put in the comment: no whistleblowers will come unless we get approval to speak. We cannot also we all can see what happens when Jason Sands, when he went off track. Let me just clarify. Jason didn't go off track. Jason is his own person. Yeah. Jason doesn't need approval from whoever he may be working with at the time to open his mouth. He's a free citizen. People were asking questions, and that man came into a Twitter space and went, do you know what? I'm going to have the guts. I'm going to have the balls to speak. And he did. And do you know what? I mean, don't get me wrong. I love David Grush, but everybody has been asking for David Grush to start doing the podcast circuit, to start opening himself up to the public so that we can speak to him, so that we can get some answers, so we can have some direct communication. And he's not here, but Jason is.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I mean,
You
I'm
know?
sure, and who
It's like we're all
knows,
complaining we got what we want.
who knows what he's out working on too. And I think it's really important, at least in like this space, like the ufology in general, for people to realize that there's not one way or the other. There's not a right and a wrong here. Like there's room for everybody's stories and everybody's ways of doing things. And there's no such thing as like a right or wrong answer. I mean, we don't even look, you know, like if you try to go through Congress and they make it such a pain in the ass that by the end of it, you're scared shitless for your life, or you're scared that you won't have a job or anything else, like, well, that seems pretty intentional to me. So maybe there's a different way for those people to come forward. And the fact that like there's this whole fraction of people who are making it out to seem that it is absolutely not okay for anybody to come forward in a certain way. Why? Like that just seems so unnecessarily decisive. And it also, there's not a right or a wrong. Like you said, he's his own person. He's not owned by anybody. Nobody owns his story. And from what I can tell, like everything we've talked about with him is how to help people. He's here specifically. His involvement has been, and as long as I've been talking to him, all he's wanted to do is discuss how to help people. Not how to help, not how to get, you know, famous, not how to go on podcasts. Like they're not interested in that. They're interested in helping other people. But there's so much that's getting twisted around and getting questioned when it shouldn't be. And it's just unfortunate. But I think it's avoidable. And I also think it's a part intentional, that there's you know, an obvious group of people who are here to discredit whistleblowers.
Yeah,
well,
plants.
You know, yeah, well, to themselves, my question to them is, what are you really doing? Do you know why you're doing this? Do you know why you're here, like getting paid to put bullshit on Twitter? Like, look into that a little bit more, you know, like those people too. We need,
because we know a few, you know?
Yeah. And it's, and I've talked with some of those people too, you know, and it's like, they also are just human. They're just humans who have families and who are trying to keep them safe. And same with the people in the black sites, you know, like there's no such thing as like, we're all in this together. There's no such thing as a right or a wrong whistleblower, or a right or a wrong way to go about this. You're all heroes, and thank you for doing what you're doing, because I know how scary it is. You know, we know at this point how you can literally lose your life, and it's not uncommon. It's not like this new whistleblower or like the Boeing whistleblower. It's not like they're the first people to lose their lives over something that they're trying to come forward about with the government and everything else, which
Paige,
go ahead.
If I could, I wanted to ask you, am I correct in saying that, I mean, maybe over the last year or several months, whatever duration of time it may be, you've had the opportunity to speak to quite a number of people that could be, I guess, classified as potential whistleblowers, or at least witnesses. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what do you make of the overall mood in the room amongst that group of people?
I have never met a whistleblower or an experiencer who, I mean, you know, there's a fine line between all of us, I feel like, but that I haven't connected with, that I haven't found as like like, you know, like you're really just like, you're another human, you know, there's like all different sides of it. And there's all different levels of what sorts of things that they're involved in. But I've never, ever gotten any sort of vibe from any of the people that I've talked with that they are here for fame or for fortune or for literally anything else besides, one, they got to a point that they were like, this is not okay. Somebody needs to know what's going on. Or two, their lives are in danger. And they don't, what else do you do? You have to come forward. But there's a lot of them who don't want to come forward at all because they see how others are being treated. And until we can like create an environment that shows that these, you know, that you can be safe, whatever that means, essentially, like until that there's this environment, like there's no way for them to come forward. And you hear over and over and over again, if more people came forward, if people corroborated my story and all of this stuff. Well, those people also have families and also have lives and also have ways of living that they're not necessarily, right now they're comfortable with, but they're all human. Like, I've never met anybody, and some of them I've even talked with like well before this, but I've not once met anybody that I didn't see is just another, like another human. And granted, there's problematic people out there. There's plenty of those, but again, they're just human. And a lot of them are doing what they think is right,
Right.
And so to be that person to decide that this is right or wrong, like that they're doing the right or wrong thing, I don't think that's fair in itself. And I think it's causing a divisive line of people for no reason. And it's bringing conversation. It's bringing conversation to things that we shouldn't even be talking about.
It's a waste of time.
Yeah, it is.
I agree with that.
But
so, I mean, I'm not gonna speak at length because I have a delay and you can't see me. So I'm just gonna kind of play mediator here and direct the conversation slightly. So what can we as a community, do we think, do to help these whistleblowers moving forward, and what is a constructive way of us making a difference, do we think, guys?
Well, obviously we've been brainstorming a lot of really, I think, extremely clever ideas behind the scenes as far as coming up with a means of displaying unity and solidarity, right? I guess I won't go into like very specific detail about that because we're still kind of like in the planning phases of some of that, but just a general point. I think one of the best things that everyone can do, and this is whether you believe a whistleblower's story or not, is still stand on the hill with everyone else and demand more transparency from the government and the military on this subject. It is clear as day that they've been lying for decades. It is clear as day that there is a cover-up going on. I mean, my God, it's so obvious at this point, isn't it? And if you're an experiencer, it's even further down the road. Not only are you aware of the fact that the people that are supposed to be working for you and in your best interest are lying to you, but you are witnessing that firsthand and having to struggle with hearing that all the time. Imagine if we had our minds the way they are right now with all that we know, and we had to, live a year in like the late 40s. I mean, you see it right in the intro of our podcast, the denial, the crazy government language that gets used to try to fool us into thinking that this is nonsense and that we should do nothing but make fun of it. So it's taking a really serious tone, I think. Obviously it's all of us out here like to have fun and make each other laugh, and sometimes we like to make memes, and that's just natural human behavior, and we need that in our lives, especially in the midst of all this. But I think I would really like to see more people get more serious. We had a government official that had a very, very prominent role in David Grush literally come out and say that people have been killed over this. That should have been way more alarming to me. People are very distracted nowadays, and I'll admit, I think we're all guilty of this, right? With social media and our cell phones and all of those types of things. But if you unplug for a minute and think about the implications of what has come out, just the notion that it could be true should be enough to cause an immense wave of alarm. We need to start rallying the troops. If that means we have to do 20 small protests, in Washington, whatever it may be, there needs to be movement. There's a lot of people that just say things, that just go on social media and they type things, and some of them very intelligent, have a lot to say, but I would like to see them, and this, again, I'm not saying this negatively towards the things that they are doing, but it's like, you are so good at what you're doing now, take that energy and let's figure out some other ways to use that outside of the box, right? This is why I respect the way that Jason specifically came out, because I'm like, oh, here's a curveball. Finally, somebody did something nobody expected. It was different. It was off the cuff, off the script, whatever you want to say. And it caused a stir, but it caused conversation. It brought things on the forefront. Let's do that together. Let's put conferences together, whatever it's going to take. Like, we need movement. I'm going to keep stressing that probably for the rest of the year at least. We need action. We need movement. And most importantly, Digby, you are one of the biggest stressors of the most important aspect of all of this, just as I am too. We need actual solidarity. Put all the bullshit aside. We can argue over ATIP and OSAP and the name of this program and Kona Blue and all that. Wash it all away. Something very intelligent, powerful, and bizarre is interacting with Earth and its people, and has been probably since the beginning of time. Well, what is that? Let's start there. Let's do that together instead of arguing over all of the other little nuanced items that actually, at the end of the day, when history looks back on it, no one's going to give a shit. No one's going to care. No one's going to remember any of that. What they're going to remember is what is real, what is the there. That's all history is going to remember at that point. So we need to work together. That's the biggest thing I can stress right now, is we need solidarity. And through that, that's when we can start making some moves. But that has to happen first.
Yeah, I have a question for you in terms of how you guys feel about like the congressional stuff going on and the whistleblower outlets through that. For me personally, and I brought this up earlier today a little bit, like I am starting to feel less and less comfortable, or not comfortable. I have less and less. Faith in Congress and what they're doing, and not necessarily saying that the people who are coming forward that way are wrong or anything, but it just feels like it's an intentional, very difficult loophole for people to go through, and a convenient way for our country, the government, who's ever people who are already in control are saying that it has to go this way just so they can tell the rest of the world that if anybody else comes forward through any other outlet, that it's not legitimate. And I just caution the people who are so dead set on, well, he did this the wrong way. He didn't go through the right outlets. He went on via a Twitter space. People who are questioning whistleblowers and how they're doing it, to like really ask yourselves, why is Congress making it so difficult then for these people? Like, if this is the right outlet that people need to be going, if this is the only right outlet, then why do you think it's causing so much of an issue?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, on one hand, it could just be like you said, this like intentional maze of nonsense, or it could just be another symptom of the sickness, as I like to say. It could, you have this massive cover-up that's been going on for decades. You have an obvious propaganda campaign against the people, and trying to brainwash us into thinking that this is stupid. So, as a result of that, these attempts at creating legislation that supports the whistleblowers, it may just be a minefield that they're navigating, and it's the best that they can do, honestly. It might just be that, where it's like the temperature in the room is so high that, everyone's out here taking their shirt off. You know what I mean? Like, I know that's kind of a lame way to say it, but it's the truth. It's like, well, this is the best that we can do with the tools that we currently have at our disposal. And in a lot of cases, I feel like some of the individuals that are helping to write up the legislation may not be privy to everything that they truly need to know, and they're just going by what they think is going to work best. But sadly, as a result of all of the other aforementioned information, it results in something that looks perplexing and confusing, but it may honestly be a genuine attempt at trying to right some of the wrongs here. But that's anybody's guess. So I'm on the fence about it. But you know what I mean? I have my qualms with it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what I've seen, at least, like certain whistleblowers who I've talked with, particularly ones that have had like a history with government for a long time, they see it a little bit different, maybe because they've worked in it, worked in government and everything for so long. They have a lot more faith in the system at this point than I do. But I just wonder, if it's just another outlet to make this more complicated, because if it weren't, I can't get over the fact that like Congress is saying, yeah, come forward, like come be a whistleblower, but also we're not going to pay for your fees. We're not going to make sure you're protected in any sort of capacity. And we're not even to the point of like job security. Like what kind of, like that's some bullshit whistleblower protection.
Think about it. It's like what type of offer is that? It's like, okay, you are going to become a whistleblower, reveal all of this information. You're going to go through all of those processes. And in return, your life is going to be absolutely ruined, right? So it's like, that's the situation. It's really actually just that simple in that regard, where you could literally just say, hey, look, if we at least set something up to soften that blow even a little bit, I think some of these whistleblowers will come out. Like just something, some kind of safety net, so that they can at least have some sort of continuity as far as the life that they currently live. Because it's like, who the hell is going to want to go out and do anything on the face of this earth, knowing that when they go do it, there's a possibility that their efforts may not go anywhere, but there is an absolute certainty that their life is going to go down the toilet.
Or it's sure as hell not going to be the same as it was.
Well, this is what makes me laugh about people.
Go ahead, Digby.
This is what makes me laugh about people who say, oh, they're just doing it for the fame, the attention, and the money. As far as I'm aware, David Grush hasn't made any money out of a single one of his public appearances. Jason Sands has come forward and he doesn't stand to make any money from his public appearances. David Grush is now unemployed. He's getting no support, although maybe there's something in the works for him. I don't know. But, you don't get rich and famous by coming out as a whistleblower. You don't. So for those of you watching or the skeptics out there who just say, oh, these people are full of shit. Well, fine. Tell me what benefit they get out of it. Because at the moment, it doesn't look like they get an awful lot of anything.
And also,
they're attaching their name to it.
How many fucking skeptics have book deals out there? I mean, like, what? Like, it's just the double.
I'm writing a book right now, and it's like, why am I doing that? Because I like writing, and I want to share it with people. And because yes, there is a financial benefit to putting in that time and work. It's called capitalism. I get up every day at my day job and go do it. So why not go make money doing something I actually like to do as opposed to what I currently do, right? Like there's that, but that's not even going on. And I can say this unequivocally, personally, in my conversations with Jason, there has been no mention of any of that. It's always been about the other whistleblowers, veterans and such. Well, these people need help. Like I can attest to that personally. Digby can, Paige can. That's all this man talks about is like, how are we going to protect these people? And how can we make sure that they have what they need because they are suffering? Like, so I've seen that. And it's funny because I would imagine that there's probably a lot of people out here who would initially assume that most of our conversations would be comprised of talking about, possibilities and his actual experience that he had that was with the phenomenon. I got to be honest. That hasn't come up too much, actually. We've been talking about ways to tackle this thing, to try to make disclosure work, taking action. Like I was saying earlier, we're not in the chat talking about pyramids and things that you probably think we're talking about. Yes, we have broached slightly what Jason experienced, but we don't really know anything more than any of you that he said in that first initial space that he did on X. And as much as we enjoy, especially me, speculating ideas or like, are these beings coming from the future? That type of thing. Like, that's not the bulk of our conversations. It's actually 99.9% trying to create plans of action in the face of such difficult challenges that we face in this particular sphere.
That's like, you're like you said, 99.9% of it. And it's a big part of it is even outside of the whistleblower stuff has been veterans in themselves, which is a whole other aspect of things that in reality really connects well with ufology and everything, but people don't talk about it enough. And we talk about like, oh, all of this trust in our government, and oh, well, he did it the wrong way because he didn't go through the congressional outlet, despite the fact that they don't give us.
But like you said, what's the right way though,
exactly.
Right? Like nobody's done this before. It's like there's just a way, and then there's another way. You know what I mean? Like there isn't really a right way. Maybe some people think there's a right way because they've created some sort of game plan, and okay, all right, fine, but it's never been tested before. This is uncharted water we're working with here, with elements of things that have been done in the past that, in a lot of instances, either resulted in somebody ending up dead or they ended up turning their story around and saying, oh, never mind.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So clearly, that's not the right way. If that's what's happening, if people are turning around and not being able to actually come forward, or I keep going back to Congress. If Congress wants this to be the right way, well, then give them the goddamn resources to be able to do it the right way. Don't do everything in your power to prevent them from coming forward this way, to go through 5 different steps. I don't know the number of steps that I've heard about, like what you have to do to go through Congress to get through that to them, to testify, to all the different stuff. Like, that's intentionally difficult on top of everything else they're going for. So, why is it the right way? And also, why can't we have more than one right way? And I think what that comes down to is like, that's the whole national security outlet, of like there's certain things that certain people can't get their hands on and whatever else, which, okay, that's fine. But then come up with a legitimate issue on your own. And I just am getting frustrated with the congressional side of it. It's like, it's been a year now since Grush came forward. And what's happened there? He did everything right. He did everything he was supposed to do. He followed all their little damn rules that he was supposed to follow. Now what? Where are we? Nowhere. And it's just
I like what Blue Jay here in the chat just said. He said, or she, who, I'm sorry if I don't know, I'm not sure either way. I'm willing to bet there's no precedent, and that even our government is struggling on how to achieve disclosure. Like, right? Like, maybe that's what's going on here. Is that like everybody's just confused on how to move forward with this, and then there's the people that just don't want anything to move forward at all for their, any number of interests and reasons and such. Mm-hmm. Oh man, it's murky. It's really murky.
It is, but I feel like it's just important to like make a call out to those people, the ones that are trying. Oh, go ahead,
Digby's internet is being hacked by the reptilians.
Sorry, my delay is absolutely terrible, isn't it? Yes. Look, it's something's going on, because actually when we were on our Zoom call earlier, I had absolutely perfect internet, and now since the show started, it goes to shit. So I'm just gonna speak a little bit now, and then what I'm gonna do is come off and let you guys carry on, because it's getting a bit difficult. I think a lot of people in the chat are saying, but what can be done? How can we help these people? Can we do anything right now legally to make it safe for these people? No, we can't, but we can start playing the same game that these people are playing. There are tools at our disposal, and we as a community can come together in solidarity to support these people. We can make them feel like they're coming into a welcoming, safe environment, that we will support them, that we're not going to tear them down or criticize them because they've decided to come out and speak their truth. And we can use a symbol to show them that solidarity. And that's something that we are working towards, and we're working towards getting other podcasters involved, key members of the community. We are going to spearhead an effort to show solidarity with those who are waiting in the wings to come forward. Because as I said at the beginning of this show, there is safety in numbers. And while these whistleblowers are sitting in the wings in solidarity on their own, with the public not knowing who they are, they're at risk. But if you've got 40 whistleblowers waiting in the wings or more, as Stephen Greer was saying, if these people are, public facing, they're out there, we know who they are, they come out and they speak their truth. It's a lot more difficult to start picking off whistleblowers if everybody knows who they are. If whistleblowers that we know the names of start dropping off one by one, they can't do that. There is strength in numbers.
So
we need to create an environment and a safe space for these people to come out. Yeah. And we need to show them that they are supported, and that's what we're going to be working on from now on.
I agree.
Absolutely.
And I think it's going to have to be more of a we the people thing on our, to support them from like a citizen level, because again, it seems like there's it's a lot more complicated in the whole government realm of things, in congressional aspect of it, and they are literally being kept, in these certain lines that they have to follow, that certain guidelines that they have to follow, and that in turn just seems like this big circular argument that doesn't get anything done. So being able to all join together from just like being people, being humans, and supporting them from on a bottom up, all of us be able to support, because top down is clearly not working, and that's intentional.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Everything that you've been saying since we started the episode has resonated with me. Now I'm going to, just because of what we're talking about right now, I'm going to segue into our news segment, which there's some stuff from this week. Obviously, most of this episode was mainly surrounding what we started with, the whistleblower threats, this potential fatality that occurred. But we do have some things to cover. And the one story in particular definitely relates to what we have been talking about basically this entire time. So I'm going to hit that good old button, and we're going to get into Beyond the Mundane.
Beyond the Mundane.
Paige, have you ever personally spoken with Tim Burchett?
I'm
just curious. So yeah, he's a really funny guy. When I was on the older show, I interviewed him, and he's a character.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I have not actually. I've connected with a lot of people in this area, but I'll be honest, the congressional side of things. One, I know Danny Sheehan and his team of attorneys are specifically focused in that area of things. And there's enough work that needs to be done outside of that that can be focused on. And so between that and the fact that I don't necessarily agree with how Congress is handling it, and it just seems like this whole political facing game that they're pulling, I have not been as interested in reaching out to them. But within our the last, especially today, our conversation today has made me more interested in that, because I feel like I personally have I'm doing what I'm telling people not to do, in the sense that I'm discrediting everybody on the Congress side of it, which I'm not intentionally doing. I just not had interest in following up with them.
That's fair.
But getting, just like with every other realm of this, there's people in Congress and who really want to get movement. There's people who do have some pull and who are in this for the right reasons. And so I would like to, I think I want to start reaching more out to them and kind of get a feel where they're at in the sense of things, because we're all so these little compartmentalized things. What's going on with
Digby's producing in the background.
Trust
It's
me.
like we have a ghost running the show. You are
I don't
now
know
at the
when to look down,
spotlight.
so now it's you.
That's funny. So,
but I haven't. But I would be interested in talking.
No, yeah, I can totally, and I understand where you're coming from as far as, you know, maybe not necessarily paying as much attention to that aspect, because it's, you know, it's hard when Congress has had like a 0% approval rating forever, right? Like it feels like my whole life. But that being said, I think Tim is one of the few that sees it the way that you and I do, right? And he, even though he's within government, I love this quote, man. So Burchett is introducing this new UFO bill, which I think this already got introduced on Thursday, or it might be this Thursday, just for clarification. The U.S. government, under this bill, would have 270 days to release all UFO-related documents to the public if passed. And he said, quote, I'm going to try to say it in his voice, "You got nothing to hide, release the files. It's simple. They spend all this time telling us they don't exist, then release the files, dagnabbit." I had to say it because you said dagnabbit, man. Like, that's the most Tim Burchett quote I've ever heard. So, Burchett is taking a decisive step toward increasing governmental transparency on the issue of unidentified anomalous phenomena, more commonly known as UFOs, obviously, with the introduction of the UAP Transparency Act. This proposed legislation requires President Biden to command all federal departments and agencies to declassify and release all documents concerning UAPs within that 270-day time frame. The initiative, which Burchett is set to introduce, seeks to address and clarify the contradictions in government statements regarding the existence of UFOs. The act not only mandates the declassification of all UFO-related files, but also requires the president to provide quarterly updates to the House and Senate subcommittees on the progress of this disclosure. These measures aim to enhance accountability and ensure that the government's actions are transparent to the public. The bill is motivated by the ongoing concerns that the federal government is allocating significant funds towards activities related to phenomena they officially claim do not exist. By compelling the release of all UFO-related documents, the legislation seeks to reveal the true extent of government engagement with the phenomenon and potentially resolve ongoing mysteries surrounding their activities. So, look, Paige, you obviously understand the legal world more than I do, right? Let's say they did pass the bill. What if, because I've seen this happen in government before, as odd as it is. There's been instances where something passes, legislation comes into play, and then the parties that are supposed to be abiding by it just don't do it. But then there doesn't seem to be any sort of repercussion or punishment, or it's just like, oh, okay, stop doing that. Hey, stop doing that. Am I right in saying that? Like, can they, like, because that seems to happen sometimes. They are asked to do something or provide documents by a certain date, and then they don't do it, and then they just give them like an extension, or people just seem to forget about it. Nobody talks about it again. Like, what the hell is going on?
I mean, that happens all the time. All the time.
It's absurd.
Yeah. Well, and they make up their own rules. But like, what I come into concern with then is like, well, what are their motives? You know, like anything with legislation, like I haven't read through the UAP Transparency Act, but I've read prior legislation and I know how legislators work, and I know, you know, whose deep pockets they're being controlled by and stuff. And so what other aspects are in that act? You know, like, okay, it says UAP transparency, but like, one, what else is there that's in there? Because almost always legislation is going to include something that's political in some other aspect, because these people are, sorry, like, I mean, most of them are bought and paid for by
that's true,
who are able to lobby. So what are their goals here? And, you know, like, to read through that, to see what other things there are, and also what their outlets, you know, like what their loopholes are. Because yeah, I mean, if you're going, just like our politicians are bought and paid for by corporations, so is our legal world with case law that supports corporations. You know, all of these people have been paid out too. So, you know,
it's like,
what is going to happen with it? because they do make their own rules. And so that's my big concern with legislation in general. Like we know, maybe all of the Congress people don't know, but anybody who's been in ufology for as long as me, which is a year and a half, like you can't avoid the amount of evidence that exists. So like anybody out there who's saying that it doesn't exist, or that you need to go through this, or that like they need to release this and this and this, like they're already not following the rules. What makes you say that like this act is going to make them follow rules? I don't know.
No, you're absolutely right. And I love what you just said about there being no evidence. That is so disingenuous, and it's a flat out lie. I'll use one really prime example. Like there was a plethora of physical evidence and even samples that were taken and studied under the supervision of J. Allen Hynek. And again, what happened with Hynek? He was basically brought in to turn the UFO subject into nothing more than a silly conversation that can happen when friends are drunk. And what actually occurred? He stepped away from that and said, no, something's happening, right? I mean, they tried to scapegoat the guy, with the swamp gas statement and all that. And then, he turned around and said, well, now that I'm not working for these bastards anymore, guess what? Based on my investigation, this is real. This is absolutely happening, and you are being lied to. Like, Hynek was no slouch, right? Like, and he collected physical evidence. I mean, my God, I have a document. I have a pretty extensive archive at this point. Even Greer was the other day asking me about my archive. That's true, actually. Believe it or not, it was kind of surreal, but he was asking me what I had. And there is an entire document that I have in there that involves a lot of that evidence that was collected by Hynek. I mean, there were just incredible information that I saw. Like there were seedling samples that were taken that, like let's say an object, for example, left like a ring on the ground, right? Like indentation or scorch marks in that shape, right? They were finding that seedlings outside of it, right? Control group were just growing as they normally would, but then the other ones might have had like accelerated growth. Like there was a lot of really weird shit that they found. There was an unknown organic substance that was tested that they to this day still haven't figured out what that was. So how anyone could sit here with a straight face and say that there's no evidence, and especially say that there's no physical evidence, like that drives me up a wall. It's like I would like to eventually organize what I have and make it publicly available, because I mean, oh my God, I mean, there's 3,000 files maybe. I mean, it's absurd. But regardless, I really liked what you had to say about that. But I guess just to briefly touch on the governmental side of this, at least someone's trying. That's kind of the way I look at it, right? Like at least they're trying to put something together. At least they're trying to pass something to make them play by the rules and abide by what's required. Do I think it's actually going to yield the types of results that people would hope for? Absolutely not. No, I don't. I don't think that's going to, there's too many hoops to jump through. But, hey, what's up, Digby's back. But somebody has to try, right? It's a good start, and it's better than nothing. Like, it is. And, it's just, you know what it feels like? It feels like somebody that has, like, a really dull knife that's trying to cut through something, but it's like eventually it's gonna start to sink into the meat. As dull as it is, the more you keep pushing and going and going and going and going, eventually it's gonna start to break through that surface. It's gonna soften up, and then you're gonna cut through it, even though the tools at your disposal aren't that sharp. That's the way I look at it, at least.
Yeah, so what I was thinking about the other day is I find it interesting that our government, or especially, and now at least anything that, like, since I've been involved in this stuff, is everything related to our government is specifically related to legislation and looking at different evidence and whistleblowers that are particularly related to the UFO, UAP technology and related stuff. And then it's always the same exact argument, in that well, we can only take it so far because of national security. You know, we can't
Right.
let people find out about this stuff because national security and blah, blah, blah. And so I was thinking about this the other day. Well, why don't, you know, like what road I went down when I started looking into this stuff with things that related to the technologies that are also related to like healthcare stuff. So if like our government is so wanting so badly to get this information out and they can't do it for a purpose of UAP transparency, well then how about we start looking into the technology and related aspects that are there for healthcare, the cancer treatments, the frequency sciences, all of these different aspects of which I see as being related to ufology in general, and going down that path. And it got, you know, because then there's no concern. Because I feel like every single time this stuff comes up, it's like, okay, yeah, we can disclose it, but also we can't disclose too much because then, you know, China and Russia and everything, you know, all of that's bad.
Yeah.
But then like, okay, well, so as this technology relates to the fact that like we're literally magic, or the fact that, you know, like sound and frequencies and all of this holistic stuff can help our people, you know, like can help this country, can help society as a whole.
Oh, why would they want that? They don't.
Right.
The sick people are customers at the end of the day, don't you know?
Well, exactly. So like that stuff wouldn't cause a national security concern. So why doesn't Congress focus on that? Well, again,
it's an excuse.
You go back to the fact that we're all bought and paid out by big pharma and, you know, and like corporate greed, and all of these people are in the pockets of all of these people who essentially control everything. And it's like so I just have a question, like that's my biggest question with the UAP stuff now. Like, okay, government, if Congress can't go this route because it's all too classified, well then let's start looking at it from a different angle, you know, because
that's a great idea.
There's no way that there's not other whistleblowers out there who are part of government, who are part of pharmaceutical companies, who are part of cancer research and science research. Like this stuff exists. We know it. We know there's study after study that shows that like other technology works in favor of health matters. So why not have Congress just do a similar, you know, outreach, but focus it on something that's not going to be a government national security threat sort of
Again,
thing.
I understand there are instances in which that is appropriate, but I feel like again it's a crutch. It gets used quite often. I just noticed this comment. I hope I don't know if I'm saying your name correctly, Ido. I hope I'm Samuelson in the chat there. I apologize if I'm butchering your name, but he said another issue is having a whistleblower wants to keep their security clearance. I find this to be conflicting with a true whistleblowing act. Yeah, I understand that actually. Yeah, how could you keep your clearance at that point, right? You're literally blowing the whistle against your employer, right? Like if I were to do that at my job per se, like do you think that they're going to let me clock in? No, I'm not going to work there anymore, right? Like that's a conflict of interest at that point. So, you know, the legal side of this is it's a shitstorm. I mean, to put it plainly.
It's a safety net that I can't confidently say is even there. You know, like the legal system at this point with how it protects whistleblowers is just as fucked up as every other system, in the sense that case law is all the same, in that it is not leaning in the right direction. Everything from a legal aspect of like VA benefits and any other whistleblower support, any other job protection, like employment law is just a disgusting area of law. You know, like every single area of law is also stacked up against these people. So
we're surrounded, you know, on all sides by individuals and interests that essentially want to bury this issue, right? You know, this is not off topic, but it's sort of a little bit of a shift. So Kirkpatrick, right? A lot of people have been scrutinizing him for a series of evasive and potentially deceptive responses during his public engagements concerning the phenomenon, right? So, like his conduct in media interactions, especially his latest, which would suggest a potential pattern, troubling if so, of obfuscation, which he doesn't seem to realize is undercutting his credibility. But I get he may not have had the tools at his disposal that he even needed. But I was doing a little bit of digging, right? And his career began really early, and he was recruited by the Department of Energy when he was 17, right? And then he got aligned with the SAIC, defense contractor with a veil of secrecy, as we all know, known for its deep ties to government projects. But this background is pivotal because it ties directly into one of Kirkpatrick's patents, which involves a complex method of holographic recording and micro/nano fabrication, which that's a technique that's even cutting edge by today's standards and could potentially be crucial in understanding or even potentially reverse engineering craft. So what's the point that I'm making here, right? The discussion isn't just about his public statements or technological innovations, though. This is potential under the surface motivations and conflicts of interest, right? So you have his leadership at Arrow, following that groundbreaking 2017 New York Times article. And he has all of these like weird connections to patents, technologies, and obviously the Department of Energy. We all know the Bob Lazar story. I just find it really strange that that man ended up in that position doing what he was doing, and he has all these connections to those technologies, these patents and everything, and they would all essentially be useful in reverse engineering a potential craft. And it's not so much about the physics problem, it's about the metamaterial issue at large here. And it's like, I wondered, is there some sort of financial issue going on here, right? Like, Paige, would you consider that a potential conflict of interest, knowing all of that?
Oh, yeah. But you see that everywhere. I mean, that is like everywhere in our government and across history and everything else. I mean, we were talking about the Bankers War stuff the other day, and I rewatched that documentary, and it, like, one of it talks about how JFK implemented this whole, or was like trying to get this legislation passed about basically the banks that would shut down the banks and like the Fed Reserve and everything. And then all of a sudden, one of the fucking like main bankers was the one that was then leading the government.
No.
I was like, what kind of logic is that? Like,
it's like, it'd be like if I set my house on fire and I was like the fire chief.
Exactly. It's,
you know what I mean?
None of us would get away with ever. Right?
And just for clarification, for all the rambling I just did, basically what I'm saying with Kirkpatrick is, if his inventions are as integral to UAP detection and analysis as it may be suggested, this would signify a substantial personal and maybe even financial stake in maintaining certain levels of secrecy, right? Like, think about that. It's hard to ignore. It's really hard to ignore. I'm not gonna lie.
And start looking at look at that across like the whole area of ufology and all of these other things, like, and how they're related. It's the same thing, because like I was talking about Ian Carroll, the cancel the conspiracy person who really deep dives into like research stuff and different topics. And one of the things he really dug deep into was like board members of different organizations and different companies, and like the overlap of defense contractors who are on the board of defense contract, like, you know, like Lockheed and also on Johnson and Johnson and like
Pfizer and
yeah. I mean, it's like, what? You don't even try to hide it. Like, it's all out there, public information, but no one's paying attention to it because we're looking into like one side of things at a time. But yeah, I mean, that happens all of the time. And it is a financial gain in a lot of aspects, or maintaining the status quo in a lot of it. So yeah, I mean, that doesn't surprise me at all, but this happens over and over and over again. And for whatever reason, it continues to get buried, and we continue being like, oh yeah, but you know, if they do this, or if they pass this legislation, it'll be fine. But it's like, okay, like, let's look back at who was behind that legislation, which corporation bought out that politician, which corporation bought out that judge, you know, like it's all
painful.
So gross. And
it's about loopholes too.
Yeah.
Like Grush was talking about how they were allegedly using old classification techniques that were specifically connected to radiological materials and just like hiding UFO information in there, you know, and it's just, it makes so much sense to me too. It's like if they detected even an ounce of radiation on one of these craft, that's all they had to do. It's just be like, oh, this is nuclear.
Yeah.
It relates to nuclear power or nuclear technology and energy. Classified. Bye. See you later. Never to be seen again. Simple. It's, you know, again, the government does stupid shit, but the government isn't stupid. If that makes sense. You know what I mean?
No.
It's a game to them too, some of these people. It really is.
And then I don't think that it's all made up of like a whole bunch of bad actors. I don't think all these people are bad. I truly think that there's a lot of people who are doing what they think is best, you know, like
absolutely.
And doing and whether it's brainwashed by one side or the other side, or like, you know, just propaganda everywhere, like it, or it's all, you know, you grew up since, like you said, he was involved in that since Kirkpatrick, since 17 years old. Imagine like you being in that environment and like going through all of that from age 17 and getting entangled in all of these other different things, including patents and everything else. Like, it makes sense that they'd have him where he's at now, but I also wonder how trapped he's feeling, you know, or like what sort of, if beyond just like a monetary gain, like he's almost certainly got something over his head at this point too, that he's being told by certain other people to say certain things, you know, and it's, I don't know.
The amount of influence that he was probably exposed to from that young age too, like, you know, basically secretive grooming, for lack of a better term, you know, he was molded to be what he is. And so there's some questions though. It's like, why did Kirkpatrick use his HTPIP technology on hybrid structures that combine biomolecules and synthetic proteins, which is a process truly defining the essence of biologics? Why is Kirkpatrick identified as an expert in chemical and biological security in a Department of Energy report discussing synthetic biological systems and programmability of living matter? And interestingly, why doesn't Dr. Kirkpatrick have on his LinkedIn or any official military bio the fact that he worked for SAIC? It's apparently nowhere to be found on any of that. I find that a little strange. I'm just saying. Again, I'm not a big fan of burying anybody too deeply, and I think that it was kind of a situation where maybe again, shitty toolbox being used potentially by a shitty mechanic, so to speak. It's like, if we had someone competent, that, like, if they put me as like the head of Arrow, chances are they're going to want me to put a square peg in a round hole, right? Like they're just not going to, I'm not going to be able to do my job properly for the people.
Exactly.
It's not going to happen. But I feel like what I'm seeing is that it was not only that, but then they inserted someone who may have potentially been like, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's not tell them shit because A, B, through Z. But I don't know. It just, you were talking and it just reminded me of all of that because it was really recent that I stumbled across that. And I have seen very few people talking about any of those items, to be fair. So
SAIC is a big topic of conversation that is, I know there's a group of people who are looking, or, you know, who have done quite a bit of research on that. And I've been in contact with them, and I personally have not even had the time to like look through any of the stuff that they're talking about too deeply. But yeah, that's SAIC is sounds like one of the untouchables in all of this. So even like the Lockheed stuff, you know, like, or the whatever, like we're allowed to, even those are kind of like the main ones that you're supposed to be talking about, but there's certain still untouchable topics. And yeah, the SAIC is a big one in that. And that's interesting.
Yeah.
No, I didn't know that
pretty
about
nuts.
like.
Yeah.
But I would say,
that.
Despite all of the negativity when it comes to the government stuff and everything else, like I really do, like I feel like we, as you know, like talking with you and talking with Digby and everything, like there's this whole group of people, and there's more and more and more, you know, like more and more people who are on board with like pushing the truth and just being a neutral like spokesperson for this. And I think that the more that we can do that, the more that we can support each other, the more that we can use each other to support whistleblowers and not use whistleblowers to support things like personal gain sort of thing,
right.
You know, like be a collective like group of all of us working together. It's not some sort of competition. There's so much work to go around. Like I will pass off any work that anybody wants to take in terms of, you know, like taking on certain this stuff. So there shouldn't be a competition between people there, especially the world of ufology, because we all know a lot more, I think, than the general public when it comes to this stuff. And so like making it a point to just talk about it on an open level. Like, I think that is something how we can openly support whistleblowers and openly call into question what our government is doing without, you know, pushing too many buttons, I guess.
Right.
But,
well, we're not you know, shoving any specific narrative down anybody's throat, right? Like the only thing that I ever really say is like something's obviously going on, right? I've experienced it. I know people who have experienced it, and that's pretty much the bottom line. And I believe that elements of the government and military know about it and are lying about it. Like it's really just that simple. All of the other details are what we're working on figuring out. And that's I mean, I'll be honest, I think that's why people like our show. I think it's because a lot of people gravitate towards the open-minded perspective that we have, because we discuss an array of different possibilities without telling the viewer like, hey, this is the one that you must abide by, because that's not, it's disingenuous. It wouldn't be fair. But something is absolutely going on. I mean, my God, like I've dealt with it. I've seen it. There are things, and I said this in my article, I didn't get very specific, but I mean, there are things that I have dealt with pretty recently in my waking life that were odd and are clearly connected to the people that I'm talking to and the work that I'm doing. It can get a little frightening at times. I'll admit that. You know, as much as I am proud to stand in the face of these sons of bitches, there are moments where I'm like, you know, if they really wanted to,
easily.
You know what I mean? So
easily. I think about that often, but I kind of think about, like, well, come at me. You know, I'll just come right back.
Yeah, that's where I go.
Hard to deal with.
And it's just like, well, if that's what happens, and I know that it was because I was doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Well, then that's what the plan was, right? I guess that's what the universe said had to happen to me, and there's nothing that I can really do about that other than to keep going.
Yeah. And don't be scared of it. That kind of like one thing I was gonna say is I feel like maybe you can relate, but I am in a unique position that I got involved in this stuff, that I am in a place where I'm not, you know, worried for my safety, working 20 hours just to pay rent, like all of these different things that so many people are struggling with. Like, I'm in a position where I don't have kids to worry about, you know, like it's my personal safety sort of thing. So we can act as like I can act as like a person who can come forward and be a voice to people and help people feel more comfortable. And I think that there's just more and more of us in like around our age group and around that are feeling the same way, that it's like you have some sort of responsibility, like you feel like some sort of responsibility to I just saw I don't know what Paige, you are speaking of.
I think he's saying that respectfully, like, hey, you know, it's not necessarily like, oh, they're just going to come and shoot you. It's more of they're going to tear you apart over time, which that sounds about right. That sounds realistic to me, honestly.
I think it's all possible.
making things so difficult and so miserable for you that you tap out, right? Like they try to put you in a headlock until you suffocate.
Absolutely. But I think that there's people who are in positions in government and military that are very locked up more. They're under NDAs. They're under these certain things that they can't talk out about, where there's a whole group of us who are not in that. And I feel like that's the people who can come forward and who can support these people and show public support for these people and an outlet. That's all I was getting at. But yeah, definitely. I know. I mean, it's just a lot, but I think that it's all power in numbers.
We got to keep fighting. We got to keep fighting. So I'm going to shift the conversation in a different direction, because we have another piece of news that I wanted to get to today that I think has been on the minds of many of us over the past couple of days. That's quite interesting. Came out of nowhere. And a lot of people are still trying to kind of figure out why. The Vatican press conference, which is, again, when I first heard about it, I thought it was a joke, like for a couple minutes, and then I'm like, okay, seriously, they're really doing this. All right, that's interesting. What the hell is that about? Now, keep in the back of your mind that over the last couple of years, there have been numerous statements made by numerous people that the effort to disclose, or at least make the public aware of what's really going on, has there's a race against the clock, essentially, for some reason. Greer said it. Leslie Keane has said that. So it's John Ramirez. Like there's been these really weird, veiled statements that have been made that the average person is going to read that as, so what you're saying is something's coming and they're trying to disclose before it happens, right? Like, I mean, that's how a lot of people are ingesting that and translating that for themselves. So this move by the Vatican sort of feeds into that story as well, in my opinion, and a lot of other people feel that way. The Vatican has updated its rules on how to handle reports of paranormal events and visions, apparitions, other phenomena. These changes were made because in the past, different bishops sometimes made conflicting decisions about whether an event was supernatural. Sometimes one bishop would say an event was supernatural, and another bishop, or the Vatican, would later disagree. These new rules also address the problem of taking a long time to decide if something is supernatural. This delay could make it hard to respond quickly to the needs of people who follow the church. So, briefly here, and again, my Latin's quite rusty, but the new guidelines aim to make sure any claims of supernatural events are checked carefully to see if they truly come from God and don't go against church teachings. Now, remember, this is through the lens of the Catholic Church. So
more gatekeepers.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole nother story. I was raised Catholic, and now I'm a spiritual agnostic, so it shows how well they kept me in their club. The rules also look at the positive effects these events might have, but they make it clear that church leaders won't officially say an event is from God unless the Pope approves a special review. There are 6 possible outcomes when a bishop examines a claim of a supernatural event, and they are all named in Latin. Nihil obstat. The bishop might recognize some signs of divine influence, but won't confirm the event is truly supernatural. He can still promote its spiritual value. Pre oculis habitor. The bishop sees some good signs, but also some confusing or risky aspects. More discussion and clarification might be needed. Curator. If there are problems, but the event is already popular, the bishop might choose not to ban it, but won't promote it either. Submandato. If the problems are not with the event itself, but with how people are misusing it, the bishop will take charge of handling the situation. Prohibitor et obstructor. If the risks are serious, the bishop will teach the faithful why the event isn't approved. And the last one is declaratio de non supernaturalitate. Oh my god, man. Like, if it's clear the event isn't supernatural, the bishop can say so officially. Like, I don't know, the text was really small, so I had to like zoom in first, but it looked like it said Dorito for a second, so I apologize. Bishops are instructed not to make quick public statements about supernatural events. They should form a team of experts to help them decide. The Vatican's document provides both positive and negative guidelines to help bishops make their decisions. For example, they should consider the credibility of the people involved and any positive or negative effects on the church community. And no matter what the final decision is, bishops need to keep an eye on the situation and the people involved. You know, it's funny. I feel like I'm reading a modern language version of a document that was written like hundreds of years ago. It's really wild to see that in like the modern era. What do you make of all that?
I still feel like there's some, for whatever reason, they're feeling backed into a corner. They're feeling like this stuff is going to come out, or there's no way to prevent it from coming out based on like social media and the interest in ufology and everything else. And so they're trying to get ahead of it to have some, like, I don't know what else they would be doing besides trying to get ahead of it to then acknowledge, okay, this is not why, like, you know, to explain things that are happening, explain things that they essentially cannot cover up anymore. Because they're really good at telling the story, kind of like our government, that they want you to hear, you know, like, telling
that's a good point. They don't want to acknowledge maybe the modern interpretation of it. They would like to keep it within the confines of acts of God and you know, the angelic and such, right? But I mean, again, call it what you will. You know, angels and demons and UFOs might just all be the same thing. You know what I mean? Like, honestly, it's still unknown phenomenon that seems to have an intelligence behind it. Period. End of story. And Grush very, very clearly stated that the Vatican, it has close ties to this situation.
Yes.
So, you know, I believe Elizondo's been to the Vatican archive. I think Pasolka has been there as well.
I think, yeah.
So I'm curious to see, you know, I'm curious as to what's actually in there, because I feel like my suspicion is that somewhere in there it says, yeah, we know UFOs and craft and everything of that sort. It's all real. But we don't want people to stray away from their faith as a result of reading this information. So we're not going to tell them about it, because that's their worry. They're afraid that it's going to have that type of influence on people where you know, they'll leave the Catholic Church essentially, as opposed to just saying, yes, it's all in God's kingdom, or saying, yes, it's just the same phenomena that has been witnessed over time through the centuries and millennia, but now we have different names for it. See, if I was the Vatican, that's what I would do, is say, look, angels, UFOs, it's all the same thing. It's all phenomena that, again, is intelligent, seems to be coming from elsewhere, and it can come in many forms, visually speaking. So I don't know, but it's just, I find the timing so odd with all this talk about, hey, it seems like something's on the horizon, or we got to get out ahead of this, and et cetera, et cetera. The Vatican all of a sudden comes out and changes these guidelines and makes all these statements. It's just, again, it's fishy to me. And I'm not saying it's a psyop either. I'm just saying there's absolutely more to this, whatever it is.
Well, what it
I just
sounds
don't know
like,
what it is.
I mean, the little levels that it's giving the leaders of a religion and certain aspects of a religion the authority to make the decision as to what something is. Like, they are naming themselves as an expert. Like, you have these 6 different options to choose from. What is, if you look at somebody's story that they come to you with, like, what is your ruling on that? And then all of a sudden we have to look to the Catholic Church for them to tell us that, oh, well, we think that this is this or this is that. And then that's going to be another situation where then you've got a huge chunk of the population being just automatically going with this side of the story, because they know damn well that this stuff has been going on for hundreds of years. Like, they've been a huge part of, I think, covering a lot of things up. Once again, going down to money and control of everything, but fishy, yes. Timing of it is just way too convenient. It's just a matter of, I wonder what their actual goal is. But I just take it as okay, we're experts at this. Believe that we're experts at this. So then, just in case you hear something, dear followers, if you hear something that you're not sure about, well, let us decide. And it's going to be one of these 6 different areas of things. And who knows, like, I mean, these, like, the stuff that they're aware of happening, that they're just so okay with covering up at this point, is kind of out of control. And it's just another version. It's like another version of the gatekeeping,
Yeah.
Like,
Definitely
doing it because of, like, spirituality and everything else. But, like, it's about control. It's about controlling the narrative and controlling the people who are talking about it and controlling the stories and everything else. I mean, why else? Like, 6 levels. That's so weird.
I know. I have to agree with that. It's like, wait a second. Did you guys just, like, I don't know, like, get bored and want to make, like, a longer list than what you started with? It's like,
you have examples? Do they
ufology has its CE5 and its classification system? No, not that I saw. Again, I didn't watch the whole event, and it wasn't in English, but I was scraping the internet for what had actually gone on. But I mean, I know in the days leading up to it, they were talking about, specifically, they had mentioned visions, apparitions. They mentioned Christ, the Virgin Mary, angels. So it was still very much filled with religious materials specifically, but there were some more broad terms too, like poltergeists and things of that sort. Forces, unseen forces. I think it was a phrase that was used as well. Yeah, again, I think they also want to grant themselves some kind of authority in the modern era, because let's face it, like, compared to centuries ago, I mean, the Catholic Church probably at one point felt like it ruled the planet.
I think it still does.
But well, maybe to some degree, who knows, right? But now, at least publicly, it's not viewed like that, right? It's not like, oh, when I go to the grocery store, I have to make sure that's okay with his, the archdiocese. Like, it doesn't happen now, right? And, like, the number of people in the world that are Catholic is not as high as it once was, at least percentage wise. And there are a lot more nations now that have become secular, and there's a lot less people that are religious. It goes down every decade. I mean, it's still a lot. Don't get me wrong, but it has been decreasing. So again, I think there's a number of different motivations for this, but I personally find the timing, like you said, a little too convenient. In the face of all of the discussion about UFOs, the phenomenon, and anything connected to those items, it's just a little strange to me.
And all the weather stuff. Strange. There's a lot going on with like the weather and the sun and all of that too.
Yeah, what have you been seeing? I'm curious. Like what struck your nerve?
I mean, none of it is striking a nerve. The timing of everything is really convenient about it. And I don't think anything, like with everything with the weather, I don't know. It just feels like, I don't know. I don't want to say too much on it because I don't know for sure what the deal is. It just seems like it's all very connected. And I think that it's potentially, just like the whole collective consciousness thing. The more people are aware of all of this stuff going on, the more that it's openly talked about, the more that it's just on everybody's minds, like the more that we're going to see this stuff come out in other ways. And I think places and people like those involved in the Vatican have known about enough of this for a long time to see potentially like, okay, this really is on the rise of people's collective consciousness. People are really talking about this, and there's not much we can do to stop it between the social media and the amount of people that are interested in like the widespread interest of it. So let's go ahead and try to lay, ground rules now for how we can be the one to determine what is and what is not real or a real experience,
in the hopes that people will come to them potentially for guidance, right? Like I feel like they do enjoy that, and of course I do believe that there are some members in the hierarchy of the Catholic Church that, while they are extremely faithful to their beliefs, they also actually want to work in the best interest of people, and probably do have like a genuine concern for people that might face something like what they deem to be a possession, or that needs an exorcism, that type of thing. Because whether anybody wants to admit it or not, those types of things have been recorded through history. They have happened. Now whether or not that was an actual demon possessing someone remains to be seen. But poltergeist activity, hauntings, things of that sort, it is very clear to me, based on my own personal research, that people have absolutely experienced those things. I've experienced them, not to maybe the extreme degree of like possession or having like my TV thrown out the window, but I've seen some things that would fall into that category that were at the time pretty intense. In all honesty.
Have you ever heard, and this is kind of off topic, but it's about the church and like the types of things that they tell people and what they don't tell people. But have you ever heard of any of these studies? And this is something I just recently learned about, like any of these studies that talk about like the bread of Christ, or like communion.
You're talking about manna?
I don't
know. Or
you're
talking about the Eucharist?
Yeah, the Eucharist.
Yeah, because when I used to go to church, we used to take the Holy Communion that represented Christ's body, and then you would take a sip of the wine, which represented his blood.
Yeah,
symbolically.
So I grew up Catholic too, but also I for a lot of years have had like a lot of like I'm grossed out by it. I'm grossed out by like the whole like organized religion. I'm not, I'm back on board with the spirituality of everything, but I'm just really grossed out by like organized religion. But there's studies that follow, like, so when they drop the bread on the ground, the body of Christ, they drop it, they're not allowed to eat it. There's this whole thing that they have to do, like this ritual type thing where they pick it up and they put it in a room. There are studies like again and again that show that this piece of bread is like living, like it shows like literal signs of life, like that. It's like a literal miracle. And this happens, like this has happened over and over and over again, and it's just not discussed in the public realm. So the Catholic Church is aware of this happening over and over and over again. It's their own priests, it's their own people who are doing this and that are seeing this happen. But rather than letting it come out on a public realm, it's like, okay, well, we'll give this to you. Like, yes, that was a miracle that happened, but you just keep this in your little bubble, in your little church, to talk about in your little town. That has happened consistently over time. And so when you brought up like the 6 different steps of the Vatican, you know, like what they're allowed to call it as, it kind of reminded me of that. Like, okay, well,
that's odd.
Yeah. And yeah. And
so wait, if you could, I don't mean to cut you off. No. We could rewind for just a moment. Could you describe that again?
Yes.
You were saying that. I just want to make sure I'm like getting this right.
As somebody who grew up Catholic and who was like pushed back on that same thing, I feel like you're going to be as like as I was by this. But literal like churches. So this, I mean, that is the process for communion. So like if the body of Christ is dropped to the ground, like they have this whole process for picking it up and like putting it this other place. And
right.
Yeah. Time after time.
I've seen that happen actually, if I recall.
Like it shows human properties and like, and there's ones that have like actual blood, like it just begins bleeding. So like there is something going on there.
Okay. I mean, so when you say human properties and blood, are you talking about the communion wafer?
Yes.
Post them doing the ceremony or post them dropping it?
Yes. And it being set aside, and like they go through this process, and it's not just like once or twice, it's like time and time and again. So it's obvious that there's like miracles happening and that like this is a real thing, but they don't talk about it. They just have it locked into these individual like church situations. And so that is what this reminds me of, is like, oh, so you're telling me that I've been, grew up Catholic my whole life, and I ate the bread and I drank the wine, and I had no idea that any of this stuff like actual, had any. I
mean, it was always just a thin, tasteless, cracker.
Right? And I hated the wine growing up. So I never, but like, I mean, study after study. And so it's that sort of thing that's like interesting. You've got this, they know what's possible. They know about these miracles, but I think on a gatekeeping level, from the perspective of a church, they don't want the whole population to essentially realize that miracles are possible, and they're possible without the presence of
I see where you're getting. It's like, well, why wouldn't they want to know? They want the public to basically keep in their minds that they are always the conduit that needs to be there.
Yes. And so
it's like you have to have the priest to talk to God, sort of. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, you could sort of talk to God, but the best way to do that is to use our holy telephone, which is the church.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think that because of the interest in ufology, and because of the interest in like the collective consciousness being focused more on consciousness as a whole, and miracles and like the supernatural and all of that stuff that at one time and place was mostly looked at like a conspiracy theory and like you're idiots, the more and more that there's publicly available videos and pictures and witness testimony and people willing to talk about this stuff, the harder it is for the church to shove it down.
That's insane. So and you said something very specific though. You said human properties.
Yeah, I'll find it.
I would love for you to like send that to me. I would love to, because like when I think of that, like the blood part, it is quite obvious, right? Like if it begins to bleed, or if they're blood cells, under a microscope, whatever it may be. But human properties, when I think of like what that could entail, it's almost like they examined the wafer and there were like
yes,
human cells, or you know what I mean, something weird, like what the? I've never heard that before.
Yeah,
That's
I
so
hadn't either.
weird.
And it just like hearing about that, and and this is stuff that's been talked about for decades and decades and decades. But when you are not in when technology is not as easily, you can spread awareness about this stuff, it's a lot harder to find. But now that we all are doing it, and there are people, whether it is from a completely spiritual level, from like a holistic health level, from UFO level, like there's all of these people on a more open basis talking about all of these aspects that for so long people have thought are impossible. And it's like, well, if I thought this was impossible, but it's possible, well, then what the fuck else is possible? And so I think it's the Vatican like trying to doing essentially what the government does with its gatekeeping, like prevent certain things or get ahead of it or be the ones to make the call when more and more people are coming forward with this stuff. They want to be the ones to be able to say, well, is this legitimate or is it not? And so that's kind of where I'm at with it. Yeah,
that's really, I mean, I've heard strange stories too. I think a lot of us have, of like good example would be like the crying statues, like of the Virgin Mary and such. So here, I'll tell you guys a little bit of a weird story. And again, just to preface this, I understand pareidolia and all that, and it could very well have been that. And I know. But the synchronicity portion of this is really weird. So a few years ago, my best friend, his name was Shane, he passed away at a very young age. He was a year younger than me, and lost his battle with drug addiction. And the last conversation that I had with him, I had been working like kind of a crappy in-betweener job at the time, and he was working at this bakery with his brother, who I knew very well, and his stepbrother even used to live with me. Like, we're really tight. And I was like, hey, you think you could get me in there? And he was like, oh yeah, I think I can get you in there, blah, blah, blah. I love you, man. Give each other a hug. The sun is setting and everything. It's the last time I saw him. So he passed away early on Monday, and my job interview was on Wednesday. So it's like, it was a really emotional meeting. And so I start working there, and I had a really good time with that job. They taught me a lot of different things. And I actually, and again, I'm not a cook or anything, but for that business, I was technically a trained pastry chef at that point. I was decorating cakes, baking, all types of stuff, but it was actually very like fulfilling work. As hard as it was and as tired as I was, I actually really enjoyed it. Because I got to be creative and I got to design different desserts and stuff, so it was pretty cool. And there was this one day where his brother and I were in the back baking room, which was like my primary spot for the first couple years that I was there. And so it was like, you walk into this room and on your left, there's this giant oven. I mean, and then another one to your right, and you could cook like 20 or 24 pans of like a full-size cheesecake. Like, that's how big these ovens were. Like, you would just throw them in there, and you would line them up a certain way so they would fit. And if you walked straight back, there was a door, and you walked out there, and that was like, you could go out there and have a smoke for your smoke break. It was, the dumpsters were back there, some back parking, employee-only parking and whatnot. And out over by the dumpsters, there was this tarp. And it was just like a bunch of like old pieces of wood, and it was just like random shit. And I saw his brother looking out the window and just staring like real blankly out the window. I'm like, are you good? And he's like, look straight ahead, Tom. He's like, tell me what you see. And I look, and the tarp, like, had a bump in it, like this. And all of the folds and the light and everything, Virgin Mary. And it's on my cloud somewhere. I'll have to try to find it. Again, could be pareidolia, whatever. But now Shane was raised Catholic, but wasn't a practicing Catholic as he got older. But that was still part of like his family heritage, and he was Irish as well. And this is where it gets really weird. I don't want to say too much information, so I'm not going to say his last name. But the next day, I went on my lunch break and was thinking back to that happening. And I had just gotten back into my car. I went to Wawa, got some drinks, whatever, some snacks. And I'm in my car and I'm thinking about him because it had only been a couple months since he had passed and how much I missed him. And thinking about the whole Virgin Mary thing that had just happened the day before. So I start my car. I go to put it in reverse and I look straight ahead. And the license plate of the car in front of me was his last name. And it was not a common last name. It's not like Robertson or, Davis or anything like that. It was to the point that I sat and waited to see who was coming to the vehicle. But I didn't have enough time, but I wanted to talk to that person. Be like, why is that your license plate? So again, these things happen. I don't know why, but they do. I've seen it. I've actually seen it happen. And again, it could have just been the way the light was hitting this tarp. It was just really strange though, because as the day went on, I would keep going back and checking it when the sun was like in different positions, and it still looked like the Virgin Mary, which was really weird. It didn't just resemble the Virgin Mary. Like, it was like the chances of it being that perfect were really like slim. Like, this wasn't just like a silhouette. It was like the folds, the robes, the hands, the pose, the opening for the head, like the hood, everything. It was just like, okay, this is bizarre. The gown, everything. So, really strange.
I mean,
really
it doesn't surprise me. How many people do you think there, and you've talked to me, like, you've been way more into this for a longer time. Like, how many people have you talked with, do you think, that were born and raised Catholic like you? And I was too. And so for the longest time, I just had I like I said, I was grossed out by the religious aspect of all of this. How many people do you think are in like a similar boat? Is that are just totally turned off? But yeah, exactly. I wonder what the implications of that are, because for me, like, I started with the UFO stuff, and I kind of, like, then you go down the spirituality path and everything else. It's like, holy shit, we are magic, like, we literally are magic. But I'm still I've just got this view of like religion specifically it's like a huge block for me. I really struggle with it, because like I believe in like the spirituality and stuff, but I'm just like I've been so turned off by the whole like specifically Catholic part of it. Like, it makes me question all of this other stuff. And I wonder how many people are like that too.
So we'll use me as a good example, actually. So I'm not religious, but I have become spiritual. So it's like, well, what does that mean? Am I, again, I might offend some people. Anyone out here watching the show, you can believe whatever you'd like. If Jesus Christ is your savior, I mean, by all means, that is yours and yours alone. That's not for me to judge. For myself, I wasn't around at the time of the resurrection, so I don't know. I'm agnostic. I'm a spiritual agnostic. I don't know. I don't know. But what I know what certain things seem like, right? So when I see things like, oh, you're not supposed to get married, or you're not supposed to have sex until you're married, and it's like, oh, come on. I'm like, the cosmic creative force of the universe, I don't think they care,
right?
Or like, when a church says, oh, well, you can't be a Christian or this or that because you're gay, or it's like, yes, that sounds stupid. I don't think that's part of it either. Right, exactly. A lot of organized, or not your relationship with God. A lot of organized religion comes off to me as two things: a control mechanism. I hit my microphone, sorry. To keep people in line. And in certain extreme instances, and it's not all of it, a cult.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to be honest.
I agree.
You know, I have seen situations where, you know, maybe someone in their early to mid teenage years grows up in, say, you know, an evangelical family, and their belief system, it's not even so much what they believe, but it's how they practice it. It becomes weaponized. You spew hatred at people. Or like, look at your great example, maybe the best one. Westboro Baptist Church shows up to, you know, the funerals of fallen soldiers, and, you know, holding up these absolutely disgusting signs like, oh, thank God for IEDs and judgment on America is coming. It's like, oh, shut up. It's like, how do you know? Why? Because your book told you? Because it doesn't sound like you're reading from the same book as this other church over here. Like, so the church I used to go to, raised as a Catholic, it's right up in town. You walk into there with that type of shit, those people are going to tell you to leave, because they're not about that. Right? Like, so again, I think it depends on the community. It depends on the church. But spirituality, to me, can represent a couple different things. It can represent your own personal connection to what you believe is the higher power. It can also represent what you feel is your, like, energetic connection to nature around you. But it can also be the connection you feel that you have between your body and your soul, your essence. So that's why I meditate. I believe that human beings have souls, and when I use that word, I think that the mind, consciousness, and the soul are the same thing, essentially. That's the you. That's you. That's your true self. And that your human body is the zone that you inhabit while you're here, and that when your body dies, your essence, your consciousness, your spirit transforms. Maybe it finds another body and you get reincarnated, or, you know, and I do think about these things very scientifically. I want to make that very clear. I'm not just rolling a dice and picking things that sound nice. I have very specific and a lot of times scientific reasons for why I actually believe these things. So organized religion, to me, though, it's not like the people that go to church every Sunday, right? Because there's so many wonderful people that I met at church that I'm still friends with. I'll be honest, I am still friends with my priest from that church. His name is Father Ed, and he was from Pakistan, and such a nice guy. Now, we see each other sometimes, like at the grocery store, because he lives in my town, and we've had conversations about these types of things. Like, he knows about the podcast, he knows what I believe, and he had a lot of really interesting perspectives to add to it. And he even told me, he said, you know, no one has to attend church to have a relationship with God. He's like, you don't have to come to this church and pray every Sunday. He was like, that's not what it's about. So, I mean, to me, I think he's almost like ahead of his time, sort of, you know what I mean? Like, there's not a lot of preachers that say things like that. There's there's many that will probably tell you, like, oh, you really should go to church. He didn't say that at all. He's like, who am I to judge what your relationship is with God? Like, and again, the UFO aspect of this and all of those subjects that don't get brought up in church, really, he's like, well, you know, I don't believe God only created one world and one intelligent civilization. It's like, if God is as miraculous and as beautiful and complex as we talk about him to be, then it would be par for the course to believe that he created other worlds with other civilizations, and perhaps infinitely throughout the cosmos. So again, God, I'd love to get my old priest on the podcast, because I think he would actually be like a really cool guest, because he has his faith where he's like, I believe he believes in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. That's his savior. He believes in the power of prayer. He believes in God, the Holy Trinity and such, but is still open-minded enough to not only accept these other things that people really have experienced and to actually, find a way for them to fit into his worldview, but he also recognizes the fact that he might just be wrong. Which is that's where he actually reminds me of myself. He says, hey, I might just be wrong on everything. And I'm like, that's why I like you, because that naivete of just believing that you have all of the answers, like that's a mistake. None of us do.
That's ego.
None of us do. Right. It's ego. Right. It's
yeah.
Yeah. How could you? It's like, well, I know what happens after death. Well, have you died? Now, obviously, if you had a near-death experience, then we have a different conversation. But like,
even
if you're,
that, like,
but even that, it's like
experience.
We don't know. No.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and that's kind of like what I was just gonna say. Quick thing with that is like,
yeah, go ahead.
Also, where my mind goes when it comes to whistleblowers, like there are like ufology and UFO Twitter tends to directly connect whistleblowers with government officials and military officials, and it's like there are so many other whistleblowers out there that can come forward and help support this stuff, and it's like, we, and that in turn will help the people who are in these programs who can't come forward because of NDAs and stuff like that. If you've had experiencers, like that in itself, like you are a whistleblower. If you're related to the church aspect of it or anything, like that's still a whistleblower that can come forward, and maybe a whistleblower that isn't under an NDA for a lifetime NDA and isn't worried about, legal repercussions, but can just come forward and then also be part of this positive support for people who want to come forward. There's so many aspects of this.
Yeah, it's a lot to digest. Could you imagine? I guess you can, because it is pretty recent for you, but it's like, for myself, it would be hard for me to imagine jumping into this subject, like fresh now. Like at this age, I'm 34. I've been studying this since I was able to read, like literally. And just with everything that's currently going on, oh my God, I couldn't imagine being new to this subject right now.
We're the exact same age. And I will tell you that it is, you have to be willing and ready to find your life upside fucking down. Sorry, the dogs are going crazy.
It's okay. I love dogs.
Because my entire world has changed in the last, year and a half. Like every single thing that I believed in, for the most part, that I like had trust in, everything is like 180 flip upside down.
That's incredible. So, why? Why is that? Why? Yeah. Why? Well, I mean, I think I've asked you this before, but I'm not really sure if we did it the last time you were on the show. But what do you think was like the major cause of that? Was there any one thing that you can think of that was like maybe the biggest purveyor of that?
I mean, all it took, yes and no. Like I was at a point in my career because I had spent most of my life doing like, okay, I'm going to go like doing the things that you're supposed to do, get an education, go like I did this. And I got to a point where I was making good money at a law firm, but I was sick for 3 months straight, essentially. And I was still being told to like work my ass off and everything. And it got to a point where like between that and then I watched this one damn episode of Unsolved Mysteries. That's all it took. One episode of Unsolved Mysteries, because I was a true crime fanatic. That's what I was like. That's what I did in my spare time.
I know what episode you're talking about.
The new one, Somewhere in the Sky. And I was like, what the fuck? There are 300 eyewitnesses. There are 911 calls. There is radar evidence. There's all of this. And I was like, and I didn't give I didn't even think about it. Like I haven't thought about any of this stuff ever. And then you start going down and that was the only thing that it took. But then from there is you start learning about what our government is capable of and what like miracles actually are and all of this different stuff. And essentially everything I was told was a lie. But it was like I think being in a position where, and it all happened to work out, because then, like I said, I left the firm and I started my own firm. So I was in a place that I can work on my own time, and I was no longer suffocated by billable hours and trying to make a shit ton of money to save for retirement and everything like that, to start focused, like looking at the world from a different perspective. And that's all it took, like being sick of things as they are and being willing to say that you were wrong was like a huge thing for me. And honestly, like it sounds like people talk about like the catastrophic disclosure and everything like that, and it sounds like it would be this bad, awful thing, but like honestly, it was kind of like a relief, there's this whole other aspect out there. Like maybe I am only just this little speck in like this, the universe or whatever, but it was like a relief. Like, okay, like this isn't it. There's more to it. There's so much more to it than like what we're being told on a daily level. So that combined with like just being ready for a change, I think was all it took in my side.
That's amazing to hear, because, a lot of times this tends to happen like maybe earlier in life, right? Like you would think like such a radical change in the way that you feel and think about the world at large. I mean, we all go through different phases, and I've gone through some things myself, but now I always, and I try to say this pretty often, because I think people should probably really sit down with themselves and have this conversation in their own mind. We don't know anything.
Yeah, anything.
Like we have science, and science has been a really powerful tool. But we all woke up here one day, right? We were all born into this world, okay? For all I know, solipsism could be right, and I could be the only mind. I don't have any way of truly knowing that you and Digby and Ido and Woo and Parsi and everybody in the chat, how do I know you're not all just simulations and I could be a brain in a vat somewhere? I don't. And I'm not saying that I believe that, but
could be true. Yeah.
The point of that mind exercise is that infallible truth is actually fairly difficult to come by outside of some, basic understandings. Like, how do I know? This is a conversation my mom and I have had before, really interestingly, because I actually thought about this on my own when I think I was like 16 when I first thought about this. And I remember the phone conversation I had. I was working at my first job and I was on break and I was on the phone with my girlfriend at the time. And I had this really weird thought, and I'm like, well, okay, when I look at the sky and the sky is blue, I know it's blue. But I'm like, what if my blue is green to someone else? Like, how do I know? I don't know. Like, we might both agree that it's blue, but for them, it might be what I consider red, because I don't know. And I can't know that, right? It's one of those weird, like, makes your brain itch and you can't scratch it type of thought experiments. Right, exactly. So the universe is quite a fascinating and mysterious place, and I really, truly believe we have very barely scratched the surface of understanding everything. And I think it's really anti-scientific to basically take all of the types of things that we may talk about on this show, or anything that connects to it, and just sweep it under the rug. Not possible. No way. Can't be. And yet so many people have experienced them. To me, anecdotal evidence is powerful, especially in such vast quantities, right? It's like Occam's razor would not suggest that all of those people are lying. That's statistically unlikely. Mm-hmm. So based on just that information alone, one could deduce that someone has experienced these things in the least.
Absolutely.
And all it takes is one, but it's definitely more than one. Mm-hmm. That I know for a fact. and I'm one of them. So we're 2.5 hours in.
I know.
I think we've done a pretty solid show. So we're going to do our last segment, which I haven't quite decided on who the victim's going to be yet, but it'll probably be you, Paige, because why not?
Oh, I was gonna say I just saw like a question, like a thing come up about the action items for the whistleblower, and I think that
I saw that too.
Present like
from Ido.
Segue into it is like my first request would be to like just consider that every single one of these whistleblowers, whether or not you believe every single aspect of their story, like just remember that they're humans, and when you're going out there and you're posting your opinions about these people and about their story, to remember that like they are humans, they have lives, they have like the things that you're saying about these people have repercussions with them. There's things that you can do, there's ways that you can support people, you can show your difference in opinion with respect to these people.
Frame it as a question.
Yeah. And
like, I have a question about this, period. That's it. You don't have to be like, I have a question about this, you dick. You know what I mean? You don't have to be insulting about
it. You're dumb. Like, there's no
Right.
way it could be true. Or if you see those people, don't engage with it. Ask them, like, you know, what's wrong?
Like, do you have an actual question?
Yeah. And also just public support. I mean, we had like talked about that whistleblower. I had used different ideas to draft like that whistleblower like an oath, like a pledge.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
About that. Like it's really a basic pledge to just treat people with dignity and like to be, you know, and to make sure that what you're posting on social media, like social media nowadays is a platform that we are using, absolutely being used in ufology, because mainstream media is a joke. So use it the right way. Use it to spread things that you know can help, that can cause support, that aren't going to tear other people down, because ultimately we're all on the same team and we all want the same stuff. Whether you're a whistleblower in the government, a whistleblower via the military, you know, an experiencer yourself, a whistleblower in the Catholic Church, in the Vatican, like all of these, like you're all, you know, they're all whistleblowers. They all deserve respect. They all deserve to at least be taken at face value, if nothing else, and to look at it with like a clear mind and not just automatically write somebody off. And those who are automatically writing somebody off, maybe question why, maybe question what their motive is there. And beyond that, I know that there's like the whistleblower fund that people are hoping to set up. Maybe, right, you know, if you're into the congressional aspect of it, get in touch with Danny Sheehan and his group, because Danny does great work in that aspect. And he's somebody that I respect a lot, but like, you know, he can only do so much. He's only one person. He's only got one team. But if we find people who are where we trust to like piece out this stuff to help, like there's more than enough work to be done, and we're all on the same team. That's
I love
kind
that.
Of
I do. I really hope that people that have been watching this and the people that will watch it after it's live really take the time to consider what we're saying about the whistleblowers. Again, you don't have to believe them 100%. You could have your questions and such, but there is a very mature and respectful way of going about that. And it's like, ask them yourselves on social media. If you have an access to them like that, it's like, well, hey, Jason, this part of your story I'm not so sure about because this, and ask the question instead of jumping right to the conclusion of, oh, well, there's one thing that I am not so sure about, so based on that, he must be lying and he's full of shit across the board. Like, that's just not a good way of going about it, and that's no way to investigate. It's just not. It's not a good way to do it. So,
and it's not in that's not in the best interest of anything.
No, and exactly. And like you said, we're all on the same team, fundamentally speaking here. You know, there's a lot of things that if they were to happen tomorrow, we would all have very similar things to say about it, or similar feelings, similar excitement. And I think people should really take that into consideration and latch on to that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to smack this button for our last segment, and then God knows what will happen next.
Speculation Station.
Woo! Yeah, I got it. It's got to be you. It has to.
Okay.
It just has to. But you've had so much, incredible insight today, and Digby and I, of course, thank you deeply for coming on the show today, especially on such short notice, because Steve was supposed to come on, but he had an emergency, real life situation to take care of, and I wish him the absolute best. Hope all is well, and hopefully we'll get him on sometime soon. But life happens, and you got to deal with that. So obviously, just to reiterate, Speculation Station, it could be a question, it could be a comment, it could be a photo, it could be anything. It could just anything you want that you would like from the audience to take with them as the show ends, and for them to kind of like process and think about and analyze themselves after the show is over. Something that maybe they could carry with them for the rest of the week. It could be a quote. It could be anything, a question. It doesn't matter. Just something that you feel is a good statement or something to present for them to take with them as the show is concluding.
Okay. I've got two different things. One is that if there are people out there who think that they have resources to offer in terms of legal assistance for whistleblowers, medical assistance, anything with VA benefits, anything like that, we are currently in the process of trying to collect that information and to be able to provide that, because there's clearly so many whistleblowers who don't want to come forward because of the fear that is involved in it. So if there are people out there, if you can think of non-traditional ways, things that you can help in, send them our direction. And the second one is speaking on, sciences and studies and everything else. I encourage people to look more into the different studies of positivity and how words can literally scientifically impact us, and can impact not like to the very, very core of what we're made of. There's studies out there that I encourage people to look more into about like the frequencies and how frequencies can literally heal you in ways that pharmaceuticals can't do that. I encourage people to look more into those, because there's a lot of studies about things like, like if you're saying nice words to water. I sent you this the other day.
Yeah. I know a lot about this.
Yeah. Like take that into consideration and use that in your everyday life, and use that in not only how you are talking to other people and how you approach different conversations, but use that on yourself. You use that to first work on yourself to make yourself whole, and to see that like what you're capable of and how you what you can do, and how much better it is on the grand scheme of things to be positive and to treat people with respect and everything else, because it really can, one person, one whistleblower that you say one nice thing to, that you support this much, can mean the whole world to that person in that minute. And so just always take that into consideration.
That really resonates with me, because I feel that there's a lot of it's not even that I feel, we know there's a lot of bickering and infighting that goes on, especially within social media. And I always encourage people, hey, you know what? One of these days, why don't you just call that person or, message them and be like, hey, can we restart? Just try it. What's the worst that could happen? They block you, they don't answer, they call you a butthead. Whatever, right? Like, at least you tried.
Yeah.
But I feel that the more that people at least make attempts at that type of positivity, the more we will actually have positive results, especially in comparison to when we don't do anything at all and just decide to call each other names or, quote somebody and say, oh, look at this idiot. It's just, don't do it. Just don't do it. And it takes a lot less energy to be compassionate and positive than it does to be the opposite. Mm-hmm. Plain and simple. Paige, thank you so much for coming on the show with us today. Obviously, Digby and his internet It's been a battle, but you know, he sends his regards in the chat there.
Absolutely.
And he
I had
will
to hide
be back
I can't
next week
talk
with us
and breathe at the same time. But yeah. All right. But it's been great.
For Paige and Digby, and of course behind the scenes, Mr. Jason Sands, and all of our compadres out here in the UFO world. I'm Tom Thompson, aka Cortex Zero. You've been watching the Unidentified Anomalous Podcast. Thanks for being here. We love you guys in the chat. Great conversations in the chat today. Thanks so much for being here. Make sure you share, hit the like button, and tell your friends about the show. And we will see you next week.
Bye.